Hi there, this is Glenn Gross. Hey, I wanted to show you something I've been thinking about lately. When I was nodding off to sleep, I started thinking about, of all things, what happens if you take a diminished seventh chord and you raise any one of the notes. Well, I realized that a diminished seventh chord is all minor thirds. So therefore, whatever notes you raise, you're going to be forming a minor triad with the two notes that are below. And then I realized that the note below that, if you take it up an octave, it becomes the sixth of the chord. So in a sense, you could say you have a minor sixth chord, or you could think of it as a half-diminished chord without changing the octave of that note. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have the piano keyboard, and here we have C diminished seventh. Now suppose we sharp the A and play this note. Now all of a sudden we have a C half diminished chord, which is the natural chord on the seventh degree of the scale. And that explains, of course, why it would naturally want to resolve upward a half step to C sharp. But here, C diminished, C half diminished, but in the middle of the half diminished chord is this minor triad. So if we take this C up an octave here, then we actually get E flat minor 6. So we could say that when we resolve any note of the diminished seventh chord up a half step, we get an inversion of a minor sixth chord, a minor third higher. In other words, this voicing right here. Or, as I said before, you can think of it as half diminished. But I'm intrigued by the presence of this minor triad. So if you just take any diminished triad by itself, it's no big surprise that that produces minor. Well, this is fascinating to me when I can connect it with something else I know about diminished seventh chords. Namely, this diminished seventh chord here, whatever note I flat will become the root of a dominant. So say I flat the C. That's root position voicing for B7, right? Or if I flat the E flat, that's what they call the two position or the third inversion of a D7. Okay, so then if I flat the F sharp, that's the second inversion of F7. Or if I flat the A, that's the first inversion of A flat 7. So another way of saying this is, if I flat any one of the notes of the diminished seventh chord, it will become the flat 9 of a dominant. And since flat 9 is the same as flat 2, the root will still be, listen, I'll put it this way. The note that you start on is the flat 9. Any one of the notes you start on could be the flat 9, which is the same as the flat 2 or sharp 1. So when you flat the note, you get the natural voicing for the dominant. So then if we know that if we can take the diminished seventh chord and sharp any note and make it into a minor sixth, and if we can flat any note and make it into a dominant, that just shows how versatile that chord is. I mean, you probably already knew it was a versatile chord because it's symmetrical. If you draw it within the circle of fifths, it looks like a perfect square. And since a square has 4 corners, then you're only going to have a maximum of 3 of these squares before you've used up all the 12 notes. So therefore, in a sense, we could say there's only 3 distinct diminished seventh chords. This one, and that one. And then by the time we get to this one, all we've done is back to the original one. We just took the C up an octave. See that? But what I haven't really given as much thought to, and I think it's worth thinking about, is what about this minor chord that's in the middle of the diminished? When you sharp any one of the notes, there's going to be a minor chord there. Whichever note you sharp. So the minor chord is embedded inside the resulting chord once you sharp any note of the diminished chord. And these things are fairly obvious when you consider that the diminished seventh chord is all minor thirds. So when you start with all minor thirds and you sharp one of the notes, suddenly you're creating a major third. And we know that we can build a minor triad by building the interval minor third, major third. So that's how you know that you're going to always get a minor triad as part of your resulting chord when you sharp one of the notes of a diminished seventh chord. But we can use the same logic to explain why you're always going to get a dominant, because if you flat any note of the diminished seventh chord, because you've got all minor thirds, so when you flat one of the notes, suddenly you're creating a major third. And if you build the chord up from there, you're going to have major third, minor third, which is the formula for a major triad. And on top of that, another minor third, which is the formula for dominant seventh. So isn't that fascinating? Just by moving one note, and in fact, any note, doesn't matter which one, of the diminished seventh chord, if you move it up, you can get a minor sixth chord, or half diminished, depending on where you call the root. And if you move it down a half step, you're going to be sitting right on the root of a dominant chord. I hope you enjoyed that little quick excursion into music theory, and have a great day. This is Glenn Gross signing off. Bye for now.